Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face. And Face to Face is one of two different programs that I broadcast here live every single week at AccessTV.org studios in downtown Hartford. And Face to Face is a show that's designed to ask my guests the hard questions and give you, the viewers, the answers and information that you deserve to know. This morning on Face to Face, I'll give my guest the classification as special guest. He's a very high-ranking elected official in the past, and he brings a lot to the table, and I'm looking forward for this particular program. My guest this morning on Face to Face is no other than former U.S. Comptroller General. Also, he is a Republican candidate for governor in Connecticut in the 2018 elections, David Walker. Good morning, David. How you doing?
Good to be back with you, Jonathan.
Okay.
And just to clarify, I've never been an elected official. I have been a presidential appointee for Reagan, for Bush, and for Clinton. But I haven't been an elected official, but I'm running for governor now. That would be my first time being an elected official.
Okay, I'm definitely glad you clarified that.
No problem
for
at all.
me. David, you've been on this program, I believe, two other different times. One time in 2014, you were running for lieutenant governor here in Connecticut. Now you have decided to officially be running for governor in Connecticut. Why have you decided this time to run for governor of Connecticut and not lieutenant governor?
Well, in a moment of temporary insanity in 2014, Jonathan, I ran for lieutenant governor, and there was no question in my mind that I was qualified for governor, but I didn't jump into the race until January of 2014.
Yes.
And I'm not a wealthy person, and therefore I can't finance my own campaign. And it was unrealistic to expect that I would be able to raise $250,000 of not more than $100 per person between the end of January and May.
Yes.
And so I ran for lieutenant governor, and I got the endorsement of every paper in the state that endorsed. The one that probably said it best was the New Haven Register, who said that I was more qualified than Governor Malloy, Lieutenant Governor Wyman, every Republican candidate for governor and lieutenant governor combined to do what it takes to turn around the state. And the number one question that I received back then was, why wasn't I running for governor? And so I decided, I gave them the answer, but I decided they were right. I should have run for governor. So I'm running for governor this time.
Okay. Now, this time you're running for governor. What kind of separates you towards just the advantages of running for governor than the other candidates that's running for governor?
Well, let's talk about what the people want, okay? We've done statistically valid polling to try to get a sense what the voters want. And by a 2 to 3 to 1 margin, the voters do not want a traditional politician.
Yes.
I'm not a professional politician. I haven't even been a politician, although I know a lot of politicians. I'm a CPA and a professional problem solver with a proven track record of turning around governments and putting their finances in order. The second thing is the number one concern that the voters have is who can put the state's finances in order. They understand that we're broke and that we've got serious problems that need to be addressed. A professional politician's not going to do it. Somebody who doesn't understand government won't know how to do it. And many people believe that I'm the right person at the right place at the right time to do what needs to be done to turn around Connecticut and to revitalize its cities. And we must do both.
Okay. David Walker, sometimes many people decide elections on who they know, that you have to be a well-known figure and a well-known face. And you kind of lived in different parts of the country. You haven't really lived in Connecticut that long. Do you think that could be a factor in this up-and-coming election, that many people in Connecticut, particularly elected voters, really don't know David Walker, or are you pretty much well known in the state?
Well, let's go back to the polling on that again. Okay, the first thing you have to do is you have to win a Republican primary, which is a closed Republican primary.
Right.
Then you have to win the general. If you win the closed Republican primary, believe me, people will know who you are, because the race will be focused on the Democratic nominee, on the Republican nominee, and we may have an independent candidate this time for governor. We'll see, all right, if they can make the ballot or not. But with regard to the Republican Party, based upon the polling that we've done, I am known within the Republican base, because keep in mind, I did run for lieutenant governor last time. Plus, I have a national and international reputation. I've got a lot more national media exposure than a lot of my competitors, and so I don't think that's really going to be an issue. You know, you mentioned about moving here. My wife Mary and I chose Connecticut 8 years ago. There are some people that are running that were born in Connecticut, but they didn't choose Connecticut.
Right.
Their parents chose Connecticut.
Yes.
So we chose Connecticut. We want to retire here, but the only way we can do that is if big changes are made, which I'm prepared to do. Let me remind you of one thing. Let me give you a name of just three people: Ronald Reagan, George Bush, and Charlie Baker.
Yes.
I could give you a lot more, but the things that those have in common is those were very successful Republican governors who first office they were elected to was governor, and who were not born in the state that they were elected to.
Yes.
People understand this time that the state's in serious trouble. Merit matters this time. The ship is sinking. You need the strongest captain you can get and a first-rate crew to save her. It's not too late, but 2018 is probably the most important election in the history of our great state.
David, not that this really makes a difference, but in your past background, you were at one point a Democrat.
That's correct. Yeah.
Why did you make the switch from a Democrat to a Republican?
Well, let's understand the time frames, okay? I was born in the South,
Yes.
and there used to be something called a conservative Democrat, okay? And in the South, when I was born, okay, and when I was first registered to vote, all the elections were pretty much decided in the Democratic primaries, similar as they are in Bridgeport and New Haven and several other places here in Connecticut at the present point in time, although that's changing. My parents were Democrats, and so I became a member of the Democratic Party. I actually was appointed to the Democratic Executive Committee in North Florida, and when I got involved in the party, it was too liberal for me. Yeah, and therefore I changed to Republican after 3 years. I was immediately on the Republican Executive Committee because there were so few Republicans.
Yes.
And I stayed a Republican up until the year before I was appointed as Comptroller General of the United States, where I became an independent, because in that circumstance, you're like a judge. You really have to be perceived as being independent, both in form and in substance, and I felt that was the right thing to do, and that's what I did.
Well, you mentioned, David, something about the Democrats was too liberal for you. Do you classify yourself as a moderate or a conservative?
I'm a fiscal conservative and a social moderate, okay? I believe in limited but effective government, individual liberty and opportunity, personal responsibility and accountability, fiscal responsibility, intergenerational equity, rule of law and equal justice under the law, and a word that we don't hear enough about. It's called stewardship. And what that means, as a leader, you have a responsibility to generate positive results today, to leave things better when you leave than when you came, and very importantly, leave things better positioned for the future. That's not being done at the present point in time, and I can assure you, if I'm elected governor, we will be able to get that done.
You know, and then the last election, I remember Governor Malloy, he had, I believe, I can't remember her name, Barack Obama's wife. I feel
Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama.
Michelle Obama.
I should know that name backwards.
I would agree.
But for some reason, I just couldn't remember her name.
No problem.
She came to Connecticut and actually endorsed Governor Malloy.
Yeah.
Do you have anybody throughout the country, maybe on a national level, that might come to Connecticut and endorse you if you get close?
There's absolutely no question in my mind that if I'm the Republican nominee for governor, I will have many national endorsements from top flight people. they don't get involved in primaries, and for
Okay.
understandable reasons, okay? But I know a number of past presidents. I know a number of top-ranking officials that are current or former governors. I know a number of people in Washington. And quite frankly, it's important to understand that while I'm an independent-minded and inclusive Republican, I have supporters who are also Democrats and independents, some of whom are also elected officials. But we'll take one step at a time, Jonathan.
Yes. Quick question or comment before we take our first commercial break. There's no doubt in your mind that you feel you are the best fit for this particular position as governor for Connecticut?
There's no doubt in my mind, and in my view, anybody who's running for governor has to ask 3 questions and be able to answer them in a clear, concise, and compelling fashion. Why are you running for governor? What do you want to accomplish? And why do you believe you're the best qualified person at this point in time to be governor of the great state of Connecticut? And I'm happy to get back into that if you want later, but absolutely positively. Now, frankly, I don't think everybody can answer that question. And if you can't answer those 3 questions, I should say, you shouldn't be running.
Right.
And you won't win.
Won't win. David, we're up on our first break. We're just scratching the surface. We're going to come back, scratching the surface. We're going to come back very quickly with part 2, get us to some questions towards your platform that you're going to address towards running for governor for the state of Connecticut. And so far, I'm enjoying and learning a lot about your life and a little bit about your past. Okay, this is Jonathan Small. I am hosting this edition this morning of Face to Face with my guest, special guest status, former U.S. Comptroller General. Also, he is a Republican candidate for governor in this up-and-coming 2018 elections here in Connecticut, no other than David Walker. We're going to continue back very shortly with part 2 of Face to Face. Thank you.
Let's face it, there's a lot you don't know about sickle cell disease.
Like that it affects millions.
People in almost all races.
Black and white,
Indian and Asian,
Hispanic and Mediterranean.
And that it can affect you or someone you love.
no matter where you come from.
Let's face it, there's a lot you don't know about sickle cell disease.
And that's a disease too. Call the 211 info line to learn more.
Again, this is Jonathan Small. I'm hosting an edition this morning of Face to Face with my guest, former U.S. Comptroller General. Also, he is a Republican candidate for governor in Connecticut, no other than David Walker. And let's continue back with part 2 of Face to Face. Well, David, I've heard you mention on other programs that a real key element towards turning Connecticut around is the vibrancies of our cities. If you are elected governor, how would you go about making our cities throughout Connecticut more vibrant?
Well, I think it's important to understand, Jonathan, that you can't have a great state and not have vibrant cities. Young people, senior citizens, and businesses want vibrant cities. What does that mean? They have to be safe, they have to be financially sound and competitive, and there has to be something to do. They don't have to be very big, but they have to meet those 3 criteria. We have at least 4 cities in this state that are headed for bankruptcy absent a change in course, one of which is Hartford, another of which is Waterbury, another of which is Bridgeport, and even New Haven is threatened, although New Haven has Yale, and when you have Yale, you have hope.
Hope, okay.
But basically what I want to do is the following. I want to, 1, provide mechanisms where these cities can restructure their finances and get their tax rates down, because my view is if you have a tax rate, property tax rate of over 40, you've lost control of your finances. If on top of that you have huge unfunded retirement obligations, it's only going to get worse, not better. People aren't going to be able to afford to stay in the city. Businesses are not going to want to come to the city or stay in the city. So we've got to do that outside of bankruptcy. Bankruptcy should not be off the table, but it should be a last resort, not a first resort. We also have to target economic development to the cities through enterprise zones and a variety of other activities in order to have more pro-growth there and more job opportunities for people that are in the cities. You have to keep in mind, our cities are small. All you have to do is basically move 2 miles in any direction and you're in a different town or a different city. with, in most cases, a very, much lower property tax rate. So we have to recognize the reality. And obviously, we have to make sure that these cities are safe as well. That's primarily a local responsibility, but in partnership with the state, there are things that can and should be done. And last thing, but not least by any means, is education. We do not have equal opportunity for education in this state. We're a land of disparity. We have some of the wealthiest and some of the poorest people in the country, some of the best schools, some of the worst schools of the country. We have to revise the way that we're approaching education to focus more on results, to provide more equal opportunity, and to provide choice and opportunity for people who don't have a lot of money. Because the people who have a lot of money, they have plenty of choices. They have plenty of opportunities. But people who don't. And that's not right.
Well, David, excuse me, you had mentioned that, it's unrealistically that Connecticut is going to have a large city, unless you're going to go towards regionalism. And I don't know if you think regionalism, maybe one or two of our cities in Connecticut would be a good idea. You look at major cities throughout our country, like Washington, D.C., New York. They seem to be able to attract people just with their name recognition, regardless if, well, I won't say regardless if they have other issues with public safety, but the fact that you have a major metro city sometimes is what many young people and people in general want. Is that something that you kind of would consider, or you don't think Connecticut should look at?
Well, first, regionalization means different things to different people, okay? There's only 2 states in the country that don't have county government. Right. One of which is Connecticut, and it used to have county government until the late 1950s or 1960, and Rhode Island, which is basically a county when you get right down to it, right? So, but I'm not for bringing back another layer of government, okay, because we have too much government already and too much in taxes already. But I am for promoting shared services. I am for promoting consolidations of school systems and things of that nature, because we have 169 cities and towns, all right? And there's a lot of duplication of effort with regard to the cities and towns as well as to the school systems. And I think given the fact that the state is broke and bad news is flowing downhill, where there's less and less assistance the state's going to be able to give to the cities and towns because it's broke, then the cities and towns need to be looking for ways that they can do things more economically, more efficiently, more effectively. And so I don't want to bring back county government. I don't want to force regionalization, but I want to facilitate it, and I want to encourage it, and I want to reward it. And that's the difference.
I don't know if you've been in Connecticut long enough. There was a time when in Connecticut there was a push to try to bring television, film, and media towards our state, with building studios and kind of pushing this as a form of economic growth. It seems like over the past few years that's kind of been slacking off. Again, as I mentioned, Connecticut really does not have a major metro magnified type of city that instantly you could say people would just want to jump on a plane or drive to come to our state. But in television and film and media, there's a lot of opportunities to put a lot of people to work, to bring a lot of people to visit your city, to participate in movies, television shows. Sure. Do you look at that as something that Connecticut should continue to try to push, or would you just say let the free market system run its course?
Well, first, I think we have to understand the first thing you have to do is put your finances in order. Because if you don't put your finances in order, everybody's going to suffer to differing degrees over time, and you're not going to be able to attract and retain businesses as well as individuals. You're not going to be able to do it. So we have to do that. We then need a plan. We have no plan. We have no plan to put our finances in order. We have no plan to promote economic development, capitalizing on our comparative advantages. We have no plan to promote tourism. In fact, when you end up coming into this state, the visitor centers are closed.
Right.
When you come into Connecticut, you see a sign that says, "Welcome to Connecticut." Underneath it should say, "Closed for business, closed for tourism, prepare to stop," because the traffic is so bad. So look, that's something that ought to be considered as part of a comprehensive and integrated plan. I've lived in Georgia twice. Georgia made an effort to be able to get that done. But coming back to what we said about before, we talked about the 3 criteria that the cities have to meet, as a foundation before you build from that. Our 4 big cities don't meet those criteria. So the first things we have to do is we have to make sure that they do meet those criteria. We have to have a plan that's credible, that we can end up implementing, so that when they do meet that criteria, and we ought to be moving in parallel, that we can end up capitalizing on some of these other opportunities. Another example is, what do we have that others don't? Let's take Bridgeport. I live in Bridgeport. It's got a deep water port.
Yes.
It's not used at all. It's ridiculous, okay? That is a huge comparative advantage that we need to be able to capitalize on, and that I'm committed to taking steps to make sure that we do.
David, you've seen over the past few years some states have gone towards a right-to-work state. As a governor, would you push Connecticut to go to a right-to-work state, or would you continue to have Connecticut operate as a unionized state? I mean, how would you go about it?
Well, first, okay, I believe that we've got to make a number of labor changes, okay? I believe that we have to override the state employees benefits contract because we can't afford it. And we can't sustain it. We also need to override the anti-layoff provision because we need to right-size government, and we can't do it with an anti-layoff provision. We need to look for public-private partnerships. We need to look for where the not-for-profit sector can do things that are currently being done by the government because they can do it a lot cheaper and in many cases better. We need to narrow the scope of bargaining for public employees to exclude pensions and health care because that has not worked, and people have made unreasonable, unaffordable, unsustainable promises. They haven't funded it. You know, pensions are funded 25 cents on the dollar. Health care is funded 1 to 2 cents on the dollar. We need to change that. You know, and so I believe that we need labor reforms. We need arbitration reforms. We need prevailing wage reforms. That doesn't mean you don't have collective bargaining. That doesn't mean that you don't have some of these other things, but they need to be reformed because they are a tremendous competitive disadvantage for this state right now. Personally, I like right to work.
You like it, okay.
We may or may not have to get there. You know, there are a couple of major Supreme Court cases that are pending at the Supreme Court in Washington that are going to get decided, you know, by the end of June, that could end up, you know, causing some major changes that would make that less of an issue. But let's just say this: we need major reforms. Personally, I'm for right to work, but we may not have to go that far based upon some of the other things that I just said to you.
But wouldn't that almost be political suicide in Connecticut if you were to run towards a right-to-work state platform with the heavy unionizations that Connecticut have? I mean, is that something, the risk that you would be willing to take?
Well, look, I've stated what my position is, and let's understand this. There's a lot more people in this state that are being had by the current policies and practices, you know, than are being benefited by it, okay? And, you know, one of the things that I'm comforted by is that people seem to understand that what we've been doing in the past does not work, all right? When 60% of the people in the state say they're going to leave within 5 to 10 years if there aren't major changes, you know, when your kids can't get a job, when you're getting taxed out of your home, when some of the largest corporations in the country are leaving the state, you know, when you've raised taxes to the point where revenues are going down, where your infrastructure is crumbling, you know, where you've got 4 cities headed for bankruptcy, believe me, people understand that we need major changes. And I'll bring major changes, but let me be very clear. I am not anti-union, and I will be fair to people. You know, both of my grandparents were union members. One was president of the largest UMW union in the country. The former international head of the SEIU was on my not-for-profit board. If I was anti-union, you think he would have been on my not-for-profit board? No, but I'm pro-taxpayer. And this state is in serious trouble, and we have to do what needs to be done to save it and create a better future for all of us.
Okay. Words well spoken, Dave. We're up on our second break. Let's take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back with our last segment of Face to Face, and I'm going to again enjoying this particular conversation that I'm having with you this morning.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small. I'm hosting this edition this morning of Face to Face with my special guest, former U.S. Comptroller General. He is a Republican candidate for governor in his 2018 elections here in Connecticut, no other than David Walker. We're going to continue back. I'll come back very shortly with part 3 of Face to Face. Thank you.
Actually, moving right along.
Yeah.
loss of income, medical bills, car repairs. What does it mean to you and your family? A law firm is not about one person. It's about a well-coordinated, synchronized legal team that understands you and tells your story. I'm attorney Jeffrey Dressler for Dressler Strickland, Injury Lawyers. Hablamos su idioma, and this is what we do. 24/7, 11/22. That's 24/7, 11/22.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small. I'm hosting this edition this morning of Face to Face with my special guest, former U.S. Comptroller General, also Republican candidate for governor, no other than David Walker. Let's continue back with our show. David, in the last part of the segment, you mentioned something that I just thought about, that we're losing a lot of people in Connecticut. I don't think people realize how many young people are leaving, or just how many people in general is leaving and maybe even considering and trying to leave. What are some of the 2-3 areas that you think you can kind of focus on towards keeping people in Connecticut and attracting people to Connecticut?
Well, first, let's talk about a few facts. We've gone from a top 5 state to a bottom 5 state in the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. We're bottom 5 on financial condition. We're bottom 5 with regard to competitive posture, being able to attract and retain business. And we're bottom 5 with regard to migration patterns. We're actually one of the few states in the union that actually has a declining population, all right? So what I'm focusing on is, what do we need to do to turn around the state, and what do we need to do to revitalize the cities? To turn around the state, we have to put our finances in order. That's compensation and benefits reform for state workers in an equitable way. That's welfare reform while having a solvent, sustainable, secure social safety net for those who are truly in need. Mm-hmm. That's reform with regard to the cities, to revitalize the cities. It's also right-sizing government. It's grown too big, promised too much, spent too much, taxed too much, barred too much. Okay. Yeah. It's also providing some tax relief to keep people here while we restructure. It's regulatory relief. And frankly, one of the things that we have to do is that we have to bring some integrity and accountability to government. You know what our nickname is in Connecticut? Mm-hmm. Corrupticut. Corrupticut. Okay. We're one of only 4 states in the union that allow convicted felons for public corruption to hold public office. Mm-hmm. We have totally inadequate conflict of interest rules. We have no term limits for governor, no term limits for state senate or state house. And so we've got to be able to deal with some of the fundamentals. Where we've gone off the rails, and we've got to deal with those basics. And then, as I said before, we have to end up promoting what we have. Mm-hmm. We're a beautiful state with a proud history, with a great quality of life, with a super geographic location, and with some natural assets that we have not capitalized on, and we need to start capitalizing on that, if you will. Look, it's not too late to save this state, but let's not kid ourselves. 2018's it. Well,
David, you lived, I believe, in several different states throughout the country, and you have something to compare towards. Right. Sometimes if you're in one state, you really don't have something else to compare to. But you've actually physically lived in other parts of this country, some states that are really grown, done tremendously, some states maybe not so much better than Connecticut. Do you have the political clout to go out there and try to market Connecticut and maybe attract businesses to come into Connecticut if you become
I've lived governor? In 7 states plus the District of Columbia. I've traveled to all 50 states, and I regularly do research and analysis, but not only with regard to the United States, but also internationally. Yes, absolutely. I'm well known, I'm well respected, I'm well connected. Both domestically and internationally, and I absolutely would end up working along with the Commissioner for Economic Development and Innovation, work to promote new business opportunities here. But part of that is we also need to make Connecticut a business-friendly state. Right now, it's very adversarial. Way too much regulation, way too much bureaucracy, not responsive, takes too long to get things done. We need a partneral approach where business and the government and educational community work together to try to be able to create more opportunities for people and to tear down some of these barriers. So yes, absolutely. I can put the finances in order and then have the type of contacts both in Washington with the federal government, where we need their help on a number of things, including infrastructure and et cetera, but also with business to try to be able to sell this great state and move us back up again from bottom 5 to top 5 over a number of years.
Yes. David, so many times I hear from people, everyday people, even wealthy people, that they're telling people Connecticut is just too expensive to live, whether it's property tax, just housing costs, businesses may say tax structures. Is all of this kind of into your platform of fiscally putting Connecticut in better shape, dealing with this, just the cost of property taxes? I mean, is that something that can be in the control of the government?
It is, and it's part of my platform. By the way, you can find out about Dave's commitments to Connecticut, which is basically my platform, at davewalkerct.com. But look, the number one concern that people have in this state, most people, is property taxes.
Property tax.
That's number one. Especially if you're a senior. I know people that are taxed out of their homes. All right? We need to do something about that, and when you reach a certain age, let's say 70, you ought to have significant property tax release because you're not using the school system anymore, which is the number one expense, of municipalities, if you will. Our electric rates. I moved here, my wife and I moved here over 8 years ago from Mount Vernon, Virginia. Fairfield County, Virginia, very similar. Fairfax County, Virginia, very similar to Fairfield County, Connecticut, right? Double the electric rates here than there. Double. There's no good reason for that, and that discourages people from being here. It discourages businesses, especially manufacturing, who end up having to use a lot of electricity to be here. We've got to go to the root causes of our problems. We got to fix them, and then we got to sell, sell, sell.
And also job opportunities, because again, I'm hearing a lot of young people graduating colleges are not coming back to Connecticut or just not staying in Connecticut because they just feel they can't find the type of jobs.
There's not enough job opportunity, and there are not enough vibrant cities.
Vibrant cities.
It really isn't that complicated.
Yeah.
It really isn't that complicated. But what it's going to take is a governor who has the courage, the commitment, the credibility, the communication skills to be able to get this done. And I will govern like President Reagan. Use the bully pulpit that only the governor has. Go directly to the people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, and a way forward. And then negotiate on a bipartisan basis, confidentially with legislators, to make the tough choices that will create a better future in Connecticut.
David, there's also going to be some other issues pending Connecticut. I don't know, legalizations of marijuana, trying to, I guess, add more gambling to Connecticut. Are these two issues that you have any thoughts about for the direction of Connecticut?
Well, first, look, the common denominator between the powers that be right now is that they want more money, more money, more money.
Right.
Whether it's recreational marijuana, whether it's gambling, whether it's tolls, they want more money. That's not our problem. Our problem is that we've already taxed to the point where revenues are going down, spending is out of control, and we have huge unfunded obligations that we've got to come to grips with. Now, quickly, I'm for medical marijuana. I am not for recreational marijuana right now, and one of the primary reasons is because we do not have a way to detect impairment while you're driving on the spot with marijuana. That may come in 2 to 3 years, and if that comes, then we can think about holding a referendum to allow the people to decide. I'm for giving more power to the people that we don't have right now. With regard to gaming, you can't build an economy on gaming. I'm not a gambler. I don't gamble, all right? But we need more economic development and jobs. Now these centers are more entertainment centers rather than just gambling centers. I think we have to be open-minded to the possibility of something in Bridgeport where there's no public subsidy and where something is done to try to create more jobs in the local area and where we don't end up increasing our congestion. With regard to tolls, I'm adamantly against tolling Connecticut taxpayers. They're already overtaxed. The latest proposal is 78 tolling stations around the state. You tax everybody, including with congestion pricing. It won't work, all right? And so those are just a few of my thoughts that I have on that.
Well, one thing about gaming, if you look at Springfield, Massachusetts, which is very close to the border of Connecticut, actually it borders Connecticut, well, no, Enfield borders Yeah, I think Springfield actually borders Connecticut.
Well, Enfield is on this side, on the Connecticut side, and Springfield's on the other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that what MGM is doing is really transforming their downtown with a lot of development. Is that kind of something, if you are in favor of pushing gaming, that you would like to see in Bridgeport, your home city, or would you still have some doubts about it?
Look, we have to make sure that we treat the tribes fairly because we did cut a deal with the tribes, okay?
Yes.
But if there's going to be another casino in Connecticut, it needs to be part of a broader development effort, okay? You can't build an economy based on gambling. As I said, I'm not a gambler. But I think that, the bottom line is that Bridgeport is the best place to have it. Why? You have Metro North, you have I-95, you have Amtrak, you have a ferry that goes to Long Island. You will attract people that otherwise would not come to Mohegan Sun or Foxwoods or whatever. You don't want to create something that's going to compete with what you already have.
Exactly.
Right? But we need to also do other things. We need to do something about our deep water port. We need to do something with regard to other types of commercial development opportunities. But it could spawn that. We don't want to ever be what Atlantic City was, but there's no risk of that. I mean, Atlantic City, they had way too many casinos, and they didn't have anything else, okay?
Exactly, yes.
We don't want to do that. That's not going to happen here. It must not happen here.
Well, one example, I mean, you mentioned there has to be a lot of emphasis on the cities. In your city, Bridgeport is one example. You live in, the Black Rock section?
That's correct.
Which is the affluent section of Bridgeport.
Yeah,
and
to the extent there is one. To the extent,
yes. But many people look at the other part of Bridgeport and say it's decayed, it's run down, or it's just not much
a lot of
development, abandoned buildings.
That's correct.
Do you see that we have to find a way to fix the big disparities and the inequities throughout our state as a top priority in your
Absolutely. Look, Connecticut is a land of disparity. As I think I mentioned before, we've got some of the richest people, some of the poorest people. We've got some of the best school systems in the country, some of the worst school systems in the country. We do not have equal opportunity at the present point in time.
Right.
We'll never have equal result.
Okay.
But we need to have equal opportunity. And I'm absolutely, positively committed to that. And I've already started taking steps within the cities to reach out to disaffected communities, which is obviously not going to be a significant issue for the Republican convention or Republican primary, but it is a major issue with regard to the general election and what I would have to do as governor if I'm fortunate enough to be elected the next governor of this state.
David, it maybe not be fair to ask you this question, but if you can kind of do it in a politically correct, I guess, answer. Which city, because you're from Bridgeport, but which city do you feel should get the most attention immediately if you are to become elected governor for Connecticut? Or should there just be more cities into the equation? If you had to say one city in Connecticut that desperately needs some additional help pushing the city to turn around?
Well, first, the mechanism that I talked about before that I want to put in place, mechanisms to allow the cities to restructure their finances in an equitable, sustainable way, applies to all the cities.
Okay.
So it's equal opportunity. The education formula, okay? We need to revise the education formula to make it clearly defined, consistently applied, and transparent, to focus on kids that are poor, kids with special needs, and to focus on school security. But I would say, obviously Hartford's the capital. That's important. Bridgeport has things to be able to capitalize on that it hasn't capitalized on. All right. Waterbury is actually arguably in worse financial condition than those other two.
Right.
We have a little bit more time with New Haven because, as I mentioned before, New Haven has Yale, and when you have Yale, you have Hope, right? But they're talking about 11% tax increase. So they're moving in the wrong direction.
Right.
So and you also have to look at each city. What do they have that's unique? What do they have that we can capitalize on? So I want to provide equal opportunity for all of them, but then focus on what we can do to help them capitalize on their comparative advantage, because they're different.
Right.
Each one of these cities are different.
Those are going to actually have to be your last words, but quickly, if there's anything else that you would like to leave with the audience before we end this particular show. I guess we couldn't cover everything, but I tried my best to give you something.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for having me again. And what I would encourage people to do is to go to my website, which is davewalkerct.com. The 2018 election will be the most important in the history of the state. Hope is on the horizon. We need to get educated, get involved. You need to figure out who you're for. You need to register the party that person's associated with so your vote counts, and you need to vote.
Okay.
Thank you.
Words are well taken. It's a pleasure to have you back on this particular program. Wish you the best of luck in your up-and-coming race for governor.
Thank you, John.
Okay, no problem. Okay, this is Jonathan Small, host and producer of Face to Face. This is one of 2 different programs that I broadcast here every single week. I just want to say one thing. I actually forgot to ask Dave this question, but sometimes, you know, you're just talking about many different things. And I thought personally to me it's important. This network, television, accesstv.org, officially, from what I understand, is the only Black-owned television network in the state of Connecticut. And I think it's doing an excellent job, not just because I'm part of this production team, but I just think the facts speak for itself. But as I put on Facebook yesterday, what you see in Washington, D.C. with Urban One and how Kathy Hughes has really developed that Black-owned television media outlet to a giant powerhouse. I think if we had something like that in Connecticut, there's no doubt in my mind people would gravitate towards it. Not to say that people don't gravitate towards accesstv.org, but, you know, it's like comparing a big giant to a good small giant. But I think at some point we need to push this success stories throughout our country. And I think what I guess it's called Urban One has done, what it's doing is just a tremendous success story. And at some point I wish accesstv.org or some other form of network could kind of push something in Connecticut that really is going to attract and bring some real economic growth and opportunities. Those are just my quick commentary words. I do have a confirmed guest next week for an All About You show. Haven't done a biographical show in several months, so I'm really looking forward to that particular show. There's a lot of great programs that you could always tune into throughout the week here on accesstv.org network. And until I see you next week, if it's God's willing, for people out there, have a very peaceful day. Thank you.